One of the questions I'm asked most often during Skype sessions is, how can I be authentic and commercial at the same time? What this usually means, I think, is I don't like what's on the radio. How can I write the kind of music I like and still be relevant? Well, today we just might get the answer to that, because today we are looking at Bruno Mars, an artist who has managed to take an old-fashioned approach to songwriting and make it sound fresh again. Which techniques is Bruno using to get across this mixture of old and new? We're going to look at melodies, chords, production, really give it the holistic treatment. And by the end of this, I think you'll have a better idea of how you can apply all of this to your own songwriting. Let's get started. It's hard to listen to 24 Karat Magic and not think of the greats of the last century. Perm kind of sounds like James Brown, Versace on the Floor has an MJ vibe, and all the album has funk and soul written all over it. In an interview with CBS News, Bruno Mars has said the following about that. A lot of people are really quick to say, that song sounds like this, or he's trying to sound like this, and I'm always like, you're damn right I am. That's why we're all here. We all grew up idolizing another musician. That's how it works. That's how music is created. This coming from a master of his craft. As most of you know, Bruno started out as a man in the background, as the writer of such hits as Ride Round by Flo Rida or Fuck You by CeeLo Green. On his first albums, even though they're all their own little masterclasses in songwriting, we can hear some of the struggles that most of you are probably going through right now. A lot of ideas, a lot of jumping from style to style, not a lot of consistency overall. Almost like after all the writing for other artists, Bruno never really took the time to look at himself to think what he would sound like. And so we get a gratuitous mix of rock, pop, reggae, R&B, and hip-hop. Coherency only really comes from the production and the vocals. And so for 24 Karat Magic, Bruno wanted to, in his words, hone it in and give himself a world in which he could keep it contained. Funny then to think that this contained little world is all of the 70s through 90s. But after all, when we look back at those times today, it's just the oldies to us, right? Anyways, back when Bruno released Uptown Funk, which turned out to be the biggest hit of his career, he ringed in his new image. The Grandmaster Flash-like video, the clothes, the hair, the sunglasses, the cars, the dance moves, the slang, and of course, the music. And everyone loved it. Except maybe... But here's the big question. Why does Uptown Funk sound like now and Young Girls doesn't? What has Bruno done exactly to modernize the music of the 70s and 80s? Before we answer that, I think we have to look at some of the things that make 24 Karat Magic sound like last century. Now, the I believe most important factor is surely the sounds. The synths, the scratching, the talk boxes, male group chants, trumpets, the percussion, the in the air tonight tom fills. There's even a number of which has TSOP-like strings. All of these place us into the era quicker than any writing technique ever could. So if you want to take your audience back to a certain time, having the right sounds at your disposal is crucial. Secondly, Bruno's very melodic lines also do their part, and while most of his singing is pentatonic, he's also a big fan of 7s, 9s, 11s, and 13s. Almost none of the songs on 24 Karat Magic use one-note melodies, the most prominent exception being That's What I Like, which is also, coincidentally, the most modern sounding.
I got a condo in Manhattan, baby girl, what's happening? You and your ass invited, so gonna get to clapping.
On top of these melodies sits a palette of colorful chords. Bruno is a big fan of changing the chords for every section, which is something you don't see a lot in modern pop music. He also often jumps outside the key, for example in Versace on the Floor, which borrows a lot of its chords from other scales. Versace also uses a pedal bass in the pre-chorus, where the 4 moves to the 5, while the bass stays on the root of the 4. This exact move is picked up again in Too Good to Say Goodbye.
So baby, let's just turn down the lights and close the door.
This kind of pedal bass was very popular in the 70s and 80s, especially in the then all-dominating rock music. The technique can be traced back to the guitar, where the open strings lend themselves to this kind of playing. Here's a couple of examples for the pedal bass.
She was more like a beauty queen from a movie scene.
Now, there obviously has been a lot of work put into the harmonies on 24 Karat Magic, which shows in the fact that the chord progressions are often changed on repeat. Bruno just loves doing this, especially on his pre-choruses, to create tension that ultimately releases in the chorus, as you can hear in Chunky, Too Good to Say Goodbye, and That's What I Like.
Jump in the Cadillac, girl, let's put some miles on it. Anything you want, just to put a smile on it. You deserve it, baby, you deserve it all. And I'm gonna give it to you.
So we've talked about melodies and chords. Now, when we get to the relationship between the two, something you don't hear so much today is, well, that there is one. Remember that in our other analyses, we always compared the pitch of the melody to the key? This makes sense when we have one-note melodies, but on 24 Karat Magic, it makes more sense to look at the intervallic relationships between the melody and the chords. Unlike any of the other artists we've looked at, the functions of the chords, in other words, the voice leading and tension resolution, are extremely important, which is why we see a lot of 5/1s and 2/5/1s on 24 Karat Magic. This is something that we don't really hear on the radio today, but here it's often used to spice up a dominant chord and to add direction.
Ooh, squeeze all of that in my coupe. Girl, I choose you. Chunky. Let me tell me what's on your mind. If you want it, tell me why can't we?
That brings us to the million-dollar question. How did Bruno manage to take this whole era of music and make it sound modern to our ears? I think the biggest factor really is the energy distribution, what I call lyricless storytelling. This is a fairly complex subject, and I've written an entire book about it, which you can find right here. Structuring and arranging your songs with this formula really makes your music sound more modern because it is designed to capture your attention. For better or for worse, this is something the oldies never really did. Another crucial factor is obviously, again, the sound. Everything is recorded digitally, which naturally sounds louder and more exciting. And even though Bruno is an incredible singer, all of his records do use autotune. Although not for correction, but for the sound. It just makes everything sound more perfect, especially in those sweet vocal harmonies. If you listen to old records, you might be surprised by how off-tuned some of the backing vocals are. We really have gotten used to that perfect sound. But the advances in music production have changed songwriting in other ways as well. While back then you'd have to limit yourself to 8 or 16 tracks you could record on, today the sky really is the limit. And so we get perfectly designed music with tracks that are silent for 90% of the song. Sometimes these tracks exist for just 1 or 2 notes, like these ones. The chorus is really the only time you hear this instrument. This simply wouldn't have been possible in the 70s, where every track had to have a purpose. So back then, if you had a percussionist playing on a track, he'd be playing a hell of a lot more than... The goal with music production used to be representing a real live band. Today's sound is more like a roller coaster ride. Again, the goal is to surprise you, to keep you invested and excited. Another thing that this technical freedom allows us as songwriters is trading space. The idea of trading space is to envision your song as a stage. The rule is that only one single thing can ever be in the spotlight. Our brains can only take in one piece of information at a time, so if you want your listener to register an instrument, you have to let the vocals stop for a second. And thusly, that instrument trades the spotlight with the singer, and we get the ingeniously named trading space. Listen to this example, which does not use this technique.
You're gonna lose that girl. You're gonna lose. Yes, you're gonna lose.
Did you hear it? Vocals overlapping with the backing vocals? Even though I'm a huge Beatles fan, you gotta admit that it sounds confusing at best. While trading space is certainly not a new technique, we've talked about it before when we discussed John Mayer, Bruno really takes it to the extreme. Listen to 24 Karat Magic and how literally every second is crammed full of stuff. Notice also how what we're listening to constantly changes as new elements move into the spotlight.
Put your pinky ring
If you would like to see more episodes like this, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to have a say in which artist I do next, please cast your votes here. This is Findeisen Holistic Songwriting, and thanks for watching.